Welcome. There are a lot of choices when it comes to best practice frameworks and their subcultures. The life cycles of ITIL, IT for ITs, running IT as a business, the management mesh of Verisim, the scaled agile framework, COBIT, TOGAF, the culture of DevOps, and the list goes on. They all bring a unique set of perspectives and value propositions to our industry, and that's a good thing. With thousands of highly successful ITSM implementations worldwide, our customers have asked us to be more prescriptive when it comes to harmonizing these frameworks and subcultures with the ServiceNow technology stack. So in today's session, I'll be providing a sneak preview into the ITSM reference architecture that we built as a result of that. And we'll be launching this at Knowledge 18, and it will later be published through the ServiceNow Customer Success Center. So there's three primary value streams that kind of underpin version 1 of the ITSM reference architecture. The three value streams are accelerated time to value, lower costs and maximizing return on investment, and then a great customer experience. So let's touch on these in a little bit more detail. So on accelerated time to value, ServiceNow is on a cadence of about 2 releases per year right now. And with each release, we have a rich set of new capabilities that we're delivering out to the customers. And we're confident with the reference architecture that we can help customers get in a position to consume new releases faster. And the benefit of that is that when our customers are in a position to consume the releases faster, they can deliver those new capabilities to their business users faster as well. The next one is maximizing ROI. So these best practice frameworks are all abstracted away from the technology by design. And this serves the masses well, but it often leaves customers having to bridge the enormous white space between the frameworks and the technology stack. So with the reference architecture, we're providing specific guidance on closing that white space and getting maximum value from your ServiceNow investment. And then lastly, delightful customer experience. This is a core theme across the entire family at ServiceNow. It literally factors into every product design, service offering, and it's a primary driver for our new agent and workspace UI UX design, which is coming out in London. From an ITSM reference architecture perspective, we will continue to drive key learnings and best practices back into the out-of-box products so that the whole experience for customers is seamless. So my name is Greg Morrison, and I'm with the ITSM product management team at ServiceNow. I'm actually a technical architect on the team, but one of the things you probably don't know about me is I've also been in the practitioner community for a lot of years. So not only are we building solutions for customers, but I've been on the other end of that of consuming them as well, which has proven hugely valuable. My primary responsibilities are technical enablement for our field organizations, and then obviously the reference architecture that we're going to be introducing today, and then best practice guidance all the way around. So today I'm going to take you through a journey over the next 50 minutes or so that covers kind of 6 primary top-level steps of the reference architecture. There's obviously a lot more detail in the ebook that we're going to be releasing, so I'd encourage you to pull that down once we get it out on the Customer Success Center. But what we're going to cover today is kind of this journey through a digital transformation. So we'll talk about reference architecture, the constructs and purpose. Then we'll move on to strategy development and architectural alignment. We'll look at modernizing ITSM, the digital transformation journey, and then the significance of a strong foundation. And then for section 5, we'll talk about some ITSM best practices. So kind of those top level things that you want to focus on to really get the maximum value out of your investment in ServiceNow. And then lastly is the ongoing awareness campaign of techniques for communicating the plan. So let's start off with the reference architecture constructs. I realize this is a bit of a busy slide, but I thought it was important to share what this looks like. And the reason being is, when you look at the different frameworks and things like that, there's a lot of different definitions around what reference architecture is. So what we want to do is at least articulate for our customers what it is that we're building from a reference architecture perspective. So being a customer-driven organization, the customers are always at the top, as you can see in this diagram, and they're kind of leading us down the path of where we take reference architecture. So again, this is a version 1 release. Over on the far left, you can see the practice inputs, or the practitioner community is feeding key intelligence into what we're publishing here. So our services organizations, partners, industry experts, and then our solution consultant practice as well. And then over towards the center of the diagram, you see all these different best practice frameworks, and these are just a few examples. But again, there's so much variation across these best practice frameworks that customers were asking us to get more prescriptive, help us understand, what are the pieces we should be harmonizing directly with the ServiceNow technology stack, and incorporate those into the reference architecture so we don't have to go off and try and solve for this. And then over on the far right, you can see some of the areas that we touched on in the reference architecture, and that's configuration versus customization. One of the things we're going to ask you to do when you get the reference architecture itself is to think about configuration and customization in kind of a different light. And that is to look at it more from a technical debt perspective, because not all customizations are bad and not all configurations are good. So what we want to do is kind of change the paradigm of how we look at these things. And obviously, with all the powerful platform capabilities that come with ServiceNow, we want customers and partners to build on top of that platform. The next things are best practice guidance, how to get maximum value out of the product, coming up with a common taxonomy and lexicon that can be used. This has always been a bit of a challenge across all these different frameworks, is even the lexicons are different across them. So it becomes a little bit difficult for customers. So we started working on, these common data models and coming up with lexicons that make sense in the context of the ServiceNow technology stack. And then optimization, tips and tricks, data modeling, and integration and upgrades. So one of the things that I actually get really excited about, and I know that may be scary, being excited about reference architecture, but are the outputs associated with this. And I think it's really important to note that while we are going to publish an ebook, our primary focus around the reference architecture is to build these back into the product. So when we've identified a best practice that we know works well for customers, what we're doing is driving it back into the product designs, whether that's at the platform level or in the ITSM application stacks. And then there's some other spin-offs of that, like education services. We can, publish certain elements there, the enablement pieces for our field organization. And then we'll have the ebook capabilities, or a document that we'll be publishing out in customer success. And then as customer success comes online, you'll see there's a lot more detailed best practice information around the actual application implementation as well. All right, the first thing I want to touch on is strategy recalibration. And one of my favorite quotes is from Herb Keller. He was the longest serving CEO at Southwest Airlines. And he said, "I can teach you the secret to running the airline in 30 seconds. We are the low-cost airline. Once you understand that fact, you can make any decision about this company's future as well as I can." So what's the significance of that? If you think about that, he's empowered his whole organization to make decisions based on a simple tagline. But what we're encouraging customers to do is really take this a step further, and that is, sit down and jot down a vision that describes the organization's future state. And this should be in the context of ITSM. I think we've all seen where organizations have kind of that top level executive vision and mission for the company. And then a lot of times that there's a separate vision and mission for the IT organization. What we're recommending customers do is take that down one more layer and build a vision around your ITSM program. And this is a pretty lengthy sentence that I have here for an example, but it just shows you the starting place to articulate where you want to go. The next one is to have a mission statement, which describes the organization's fundamental purpose or current approach to achieving that vision. And this can be something very simple as well. The next thing, which I think has enormous power, and I just showed you an example of that with the Southwest Airlines quote, but taglines, they're meant to provide consumers with an indication of your brand, its market position, and just a few memorable words. So taglines that we use at ServiceNow, and I'll just give you a real quick example of this, are modernizing the way people work, delightful customer experience, single system of engagement. So what this means, when I think about my role as an individual contributor, I don't have to go to my boss and ask questions about what I should be working on next. There's a work stream that comes through, and I can validate it against these taglines to make sure that I'm aligned with where the organization is trying to go. And in this case, it would be an ITSM implementation, but clearly there's huge value here, and you can use these taglines throughout the ITSM ecosystem, and they have enormous value. So just to set a little context around the reference architecture, I want to talk a little bit about CIO perspectives, and I just have one slide on here, but I think it's important to note. So 3/4 of CIOs are leading digital transformation efforts today. This is huge. So when you start to look at some of the things I'm going to introduce you to today, you'll see that this is really important to make sure you're aligned with where the organization is trying to go. The next one is machine learning. So 53% of CIOs see machine learning as a key focus area. And as you probably know, in Kingston, we launched our machine learning capabilities with Agent Intelligence. And Agent Intelligence basically does auto categorization and auto assignment. So very, very powerful. We're going to continue to expand that footprint. And it's really designed so that our Agent Intelligence or machine learning capabilities are designed so that if you're a ServiceNow admin, or you can create a report in ServiceNow, you already have the skill set to get the prediction models built and incorporated into your instance. And all of the machine learning is based on the data in your instance. So extremely powerful. The next one is consumerization. And 91% of CIOs still think employees are spending too much time on manual tasks. And I can tell you within the ServiceNow family, we totally agree with this. And we are doing major themes around all of our product designs and all of that to really change the paradigm of consumerization and how users, both on the fulfiller side, but on the business side as well, interact with the ServiceNow technology stack. With that, let's dive into the digital transformation journey. So this is a model that we built out in the reference architecture, and it shows you a number of tracks in here, and I'll just touch on each one of these briefly, and then I'll share where you go with this. So if you think first about the business expectations of IT, there's kind of 3 different perspectives of that. One is that it's utility-based, so you're essentially, IT's viewed as more of a cost center, just a cost of doing business. And then there's the enabler where, IT is kind of leading some inroads to different areas where the business can expand and take advantage of other technologies. And then there's the transforms the business kinds of models. So think about like Uber and things like that, where the technology is really an underlying capability that drives where the business is going. And then knowledge-centered support. This is essential for creating a digital operating model. So if you just kind of look across that scale organically, you move from data to information to knowledge and wisdom. But the whole idea with the digital operating model is to move knowledge and information and solutions closer to the customers and reduce some of that handling that's happening on the back end. So knowledge-centered support has to be a key capability that you're focused on in the digital operating model. So with the framework considerations, again, these are examples. You may want to swap some of these out, but the recommendations that we have inside the reference architecture kind of layer into these different areas of COBIT, ITIL, TOGAF, IT for IT, SecOps, DevOps, and then continual integration and continual deployment. One of the things that we share around TOGAF, just to give you an example, is the architecture review boards. So a lot of our customers are trying to get back to baseline if they've done heavy customizations in the past, or if you're a new customer and you want to make sure that you stay on track with what you're doing with your ITSM program, setting up an ITSM architecture review board can have huge value. And that's a great example of how you take something from a framework and leverage it on the ServiceNow technology stack and move forward with it. The next one is degree of automation. This is something that's been around for quite some time. And in my experience, IT lags a little bit behind on some of this. So most IT organizations, I think, fall somewhere between manual and programmatic here. They usually take advantage of some orchestration capabilities, but a lot of it, there's still a lot of opportunity in this space to automate. And then obviously with the machine learning and agent intelligence and artificial intelligence, you can see this is a key focus area for CIOs. So this is an area that we believe is an important focus area as you're building out your digital operating model. The next one is innovation models. So this is a real simple example of innovation models. And you can see you can go from laggard all the way through to innovator. What's not apparent in here, and we do articulate this in more detail in the reference architecture, is you should categorize your application stacks to fit in different areas. So it's not a one size fits all here. But what I really want to point out in this particular model is when you think about accelerated time to value with ServiceNow, we really want to make sure that we can help customers get in that early adopter or innovator section of the innovation models so that they can take advantage of those capabilities faster and deliver them to business users. One other key consideration as you're classifying applications is, if you think about ServiceNow, we deliver high quality products on every release. It's an underlying commitment that we have in the organization. So you're safe for the most part of operating out in that early adopter and innovator area. For vendors and application stacks that may not have that good of a quality track record, they may fit into different categories in your organization. And then lastly are the organizational models. The reason this is important is because I think we would all agree that over the last 10 years, the organizational models in IT have changed dramatically. So offshoring, onshoring, multi-service provider networks, and this is really where the SIAM environment was born, the service integration and management, where it's an overlay that helps really bring continuity across all these various organizational structures and service providers so that it's a seamless experience for customers. Now, one thing that's important to note here too is SIAM is very powerful. There's also these IT for IT initiatives that are going on to kind of harmonize the different frameworks and bring some of this together so that IT can run as a business. So the idea here is you align the digital operating model with your strategy. Then you want to pin the current state of where you're at today, and then pin your target state. So where are we now? Where do we want to be? And at the end, what you want to have is your own digital operating model that's tailored to your organization. And you can see I pin the current state and future state in here just as an example. But I've got the frameworks identified that I'm going to use. Where am I at with knowledge? Where am I focused at from an automation perspective, and right down the line. So the next thing that I want to touch on here is being aligned with the business goals. So IT has become a lot more agile in the last 5+ years, but the business has also become a lot more agile as well. So when you think about two dynamics that are moving very, very fastly, the business is moving to market conditions, IT is moving to technology shifts and a variety of other things. So it's really important that you go through the exercise of mapping to the business goals periodically to make sure you continue that alignment. So what we recommend, and I've got a couple really simple examples in here, are that you start off with conducting an inventory of your raw capabilities and then categorizing them with some well-defined framework like ITIL. And I'll explain why I chose ITIL in just a second. The next thing is to map to COBIT, because COBIT has a really nice structure for mapping back to business goals. So you want to map those raw capabilities that you've identified in the inventory back to your COBIT control objectives. And you can leverage something like the governance of enterprise IT from COBIT as well. But the idea here is just very simply to go through it and map those. And one of the reasons I selected ITIL as we built out the reference architecture is because these mappings from ITIL to COBIT are already open source out there. So you can get these and just groom them to the need of your business, and you can very quickly start to pull this model together. And then the next thing we recommend is that you map the COBIT control objectives over to your IT goals, and then ultimately map your IT goals to the business goals. So a couple things just to look at. This is a very simple spreadsheet example that you can see over to the right, but you can start to see patterns in where your investments are and where your capabilities are based on the business goals. So it really helps you formulate, what am I going to work on next? Maybe where am I underinvesting from an alignment perspective, and those types of things. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is ITSM roadmaps. So roadmaps are, there's a variety of templates out there. There's probably a dozen or so different roadmap templates that are widely used, and most organizations take these and tailor them to their needs. So that the focus of this particular discussion around the roadmap is to point out a few key elements that you should incorporate into your roadmap template, no matter which one you're using. So in this example, what we're recommending is, first, in call out number 1, capture your last audit, your maturity audit. So where are you now with each one of these different process areas? And then secondly, identify the target maturity level so you know where you want to go. It helps you determine when to make investments and some of the alignment issues. The next one is call out number 3, which is shading. The reason this is shaded is it's just a great visual to kind of see where you are from a process maturity perspective, but also where you want to go. The next one is technology capabilities. So this is where you go through and do an inventory of your underlying technology and factor them in. This next one I want to spend a little bit of time on because I think it's a really interesting dynamic, and it's something that we're probably all aware of in IT, but it seems to be a very common problem, and that is this idea of lifecycle coding with the technology capabilities. So we're pretty good at creating roadmaps and introducing new technologies and capabilities into the environment. What we're not always so good at is making sure we contain and then ultimately retire those old application stacks or legacy systems in a timely manner. And the issue with that ends up being that it creates a lot of cost in the organization when you're maintaining multiple systems. So it's important to not only think about how you're activating your journey or your capabilities, but also how you're deactivating, containing, and retiring the older ones. And then lastly, the call out number 6 is, do some alignment between the process maturity and the technology capabilities. And the reason this is important is because, if you think about the cadence that ServiceNow is releasing capabilities, that sometimes we're pulling new features and capabilities in that customers can take advantage of. So in theory, you can pull maturity in on some of these and maybe get processes more mature than you had originally planned to in a shorter amount of time. The next one is ITSM maturity. So maturity sometimes doesn't get the attention that it probably needs. It seems like it's just a gauge, but it's actually way more powerful than that. And what we actually recommend in the reference architecture is that you use kind of a hybrid of a couple different models. So you can start off with something like ISO 20000, and ISO 20000 kind of gives you that binary view of, what do I have in my environment in terms of coverage? And you can just see, I've got most of incident, I've got problem, I've got change. The problem with ISO 20000 by itself is it just is kind of a binary checkbox of if it's there or not. It doesn't give you any real indication of actual maturity. So what we actually recommend you do is combine that with ISO 15504, so a more detailed reference model. And what I want to share with you today is this is a really cool concept that is not apparent from just looking at ISO 15504. But what we actually recommend is that you take that reference model and drill it all the way down into the individual activities. So in the example you can see here, major incident, based on the common definitions that are contained in ISO 15504, I can see that I'm riding on a maturity level of 3. But some of the other areas like initial diagnosis or early identification, I'm not doing so well in. So now I can get a real granular and specific view of maturity across the incident management process. And then I want to establish the maturity targets as well so I can see where I want to go. And then these are just a couple more examples of the more detailed view. So ISO 20000 from a problem perspective, it doesn't exist because I'm not doing all the activities. But in reality, I am still raising known errors and doing some categorization. So I just need to figure out where to make those investments and how to redirect some of my teams to enhance that. And then lastly, we recommend that you come up with an assessment strategy. And what that means is process owners tend to have a pretty optimistic view of what their processes are. And that's not a dig towards them. It's pretty common. It's kind of the curse of knowledge. When you know how the process works and you're intimately familiar with the design, it's pretty easy to assume that everybody else understands that design. Where it starts to break down a little bit or you find variation in maturity is when you go out and ask the consumers of that process, because many times they don't know. So what we recommend from an assessment strategy perspective is that you get on a regular cadence, but you alternate between internal and external assessments. So you can do the self-assessment, but then bring in another organization to actually do an external look at it. And then using ISO 15504, you have very specific language that you can, kind of keep a common structure and repeatability around the maturity assessments. The next one's architectural considerations. So as I mentioned earlier on, we encourage customers to build applications on our platform. Our platform is incredibly powerful, and we have a number of application stacks that ride on it today, including ITSM. But if you just take a step back and look at the power of the platform, there's dev tools, there's no-code, low-code capabilities, there's advanced development tools, there's core services like reporting, CMDB, orchestrations, knowledge management, the workflow engine, business rules, the list goes on and on. But the beauty of it is when you build applications on top of the Now platform, you can leverage all these underlying capabilities without having to build them yourself. So it has enormous value, and you can really take and focus on areas where you want to extend the ecosystem, either of your ITSM ecosystem or even areas in IT where there still may be gaps. And then over on the far left of this diagram, you can see that we just newly released supervised machine learning with Kingston. We've got Flow Designer as well, which is basically a no-code solution that allows process owners to build their own custom flows without really having a development background. Excuse me. But the machine learning capabilities are going to continue to be a key focus area for us at ServiceNow, and they're being built at the platform level, so the application stacks that ride on the platform can take advantage of these capabilities. And then over on the far right, you can see we have a very robust set of standard integration services. So basically, we can integrate or interface with almost any type of platform that's using standard interfaces like REST, SOAP, XML, JSON. There's just a variety of options there in terms of being able to interface with the Now platform. So one of the things that you can have incredible power for the organization is you can use ServiceNow in an example such as ITSM to have the service portal be the single system of engagement and do some of the back-end integration work to link into these other systems. So from a business user perspective, it's a seamless experience using a single interface. The last thing I want to point out in here is that in Kingston, we released Integration Hub, which is a capability that really integrations are done to external sources. So if you haven't taken a look at that, very powerful. It's something worth looking into. So I'll spend just a touch on this just a little bit, but I think it's important enough to at least introduce in this presentation, and that is the concept of scoped apps. So this is the ability to create custom applications, and so it's where customers can extend functionality to support another area of the business. So if you think about ITSM, ITOM, some of the core application stacks that come directly from ServiceNow, they typically live in the global scope, and they can read records, run API requests across them, create configuration records across them. But if you build scoped apps on top of the Now platform, now you can start to have some protection for your native applications so that you're not getting caught up in where there's upgrade complexities and things like that. So that's a very much an overly simplified approach to scoped apps, but I wanted to at least introduce the concept in this short presentation. Foundation for success. So any of you that have been to any of my presentations in the past, you know this is something that I always drive home whenever I go into engagements with customers or help customers, kind of take their ITSM program to the next level. It's absolutely essential to have a strong foundation. So we've all seen the concept of the RACI, but I want to point out a couple areas that we believe have high value and we encourage customers to consider as part of the reference architecture. One is to, have your activities by process areas. So there's a world beyond ITIL and IT. So it's important to, capture all of the activities that are going on. And one important note is you always have to match authority and accountability. It's so important. And this is sometimes misunderstood, but there can only be one role that's accountable in a RACI. You can't have multiple A's. You can have multiple areas that are responsible or consulted or informed, but there's only one role that can be accountable. So when you're building out your RACI is include the business roles. They have to be part of the RACI. It can't be an IT-centric view of things. And then include your external service providers. If you're using offshoring resources or MSPs, those kinds of things, make sure you're including those roles so that they understand what their responsibilities are in the service delivery model. And lastly, number 4, which is probably the most important, particularly legacy ITSM solution over to the modern ServiceNow platform and application stack, is to look at your deliverables associated with those activities, because what happens over time is ITSM programs tend to add things and incorporate new things. And when you go back and challenge and ask people, why are we doing this? A lot of times the answer you'll get is because that's the way we've always done it. I think we've all heard that. So by going through this simple exercise of, going through and finding out what the actual deliverable is and who's consuming it and trying to understand it from that perspective provides the opportunity for you to kind of clean up your processes and activities to make sure as you're moving over to the new modern ITSM solution, or, as you're innovating in your organization, that there's still value associated with the activities that the teams are performing. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about ITSM top-level best practices. So I very specifically for this presentation just took like the top 4 or 5 of the each areas to talk about. And again, the customer success team at ServiceNow, which is a new team, has done a lot more detailed work about, basically how to turn the wrenches inside ServiceNow to get maximum value out of some of the applications. But what I'm going to touch on today are kind of those top level best practices. So we'll start with Service Desk. The first thing is omni-channel. So really, understand how your business users want to engage with IT. So it could be things like self-service, tech lounges, virtual agent, live agent. People have preferences, and it's important to make sure that your omni-channel approach is aligned to how the business wants to be. The next one is automation. As I mentioned earlier, automation is just such a rich area for organizations to kind of change the dynamic and the paradigm of how they're delivering services in IT. So the adoption of machine learning, virtual agent technology, automation, bots, all of these kinds of capabilities can really add value. And as you probably know, we released our machine learning capabilities in Kingston, but our virtual agent capabilities are going to come out in the London, and there's a lot of power associated with those. I think you'll be very excited when you see that. The next one is templates. Templates have been around for years, but the reason I'm introducing them or reintroducing them here is because I think sometimes we lose sight of how important they are. Service desks tend to have a fair amount of turnover and volatility by design. In other words, if your service desk agents are good, they tend to go on in different areas in the organization and get promoted. If they're not so good, they usually move on to other areas. So there's a lot of turnover that happens, and templates can really give you predefined steps to actually populate records and make it simpler for agents to quickly interact with interactions that are coming in, whether it's requests or incidents. The other thing that it's important to note with templates, and the reason I brought it up in here, is templates can add huge value when it comes to machine learning capabilities as well. So once you can start to normalize the data associated in the records, you can start to build prediction models around that data that make a lot more sense and have a lot better prediction percentage or ratio. So take advantage of templates. This is a key area. And then continue to digitize and shift left. Again, it's all about, bringing bots and machine learning and moving knowledge and solutions closer to the business users and reducing the overhead inside IT and delivering those. And then lastly, tech lounges. So tech lounges, tech cafe, and in London, we're going to be releasing the walk-up experience, which is really exciting for us. When we took a look at what customers were doing with tech lounges, tech cafes, those kinds of things, the CSAT ratings associated with those are just phenomenal for customer organizations. So what we did with London is we went ahead and built the walk-up experience native in the ITSM technology stack. So walk-up experience, you can now schedule the walk-up. You'll have visibility about it through it. You can create incidents from it, requests. Very, very powerful, great solution. The next area I'm going to touch on is incident management. So the first thing is categorization. Again, this has a relationship back to the machine learning capabilities as well, in the sense that categorizations tend to grow over time. And a lot of times we don't take the time to go back and clean them up and groom them. So the recommendation that we have is to periodically groom your categorization schemas to make sure they're still accurate and that they're useful. So one of the advantages of keeping your categorization schema clean is, if you think about even our agent intelligence solution, where it's building prediction models around categorization and short description and priority to come up with the categorization. The cleaner those categorizations are, the easier it is for those prediction models to accurately predict where that request needs to go. KPIs and benchmarks. If you have not looked at our ServiceNow benchmarks application, you're missing a great opportunity. It actually is incredibly powerful. It has most of the common ITSM KPIs. And what's really cool about it is it lets you actually compare yourself with like or peer organizations. So organizations of similar size, organizations in similar geographies, and then organizations in similar industries. But all the data is anomalized, so you're not able to see who it is, but you can actually look at data and trends. So what that allows you to do is see how your organization or that KPI in your organization is comparing with like organizations. What's also very cool in Kingston is we introduced ranked recommendations for those benchmarks that are performing below the global benchmark. Now we provide a set of ranked recommendations of actions that you should take, and you can pin when you take that action and look at the trajectory and how it's changed since you made that adjustment to change the behavior around that KPI. The next one is major incident management. In Kingston, we released our major incident management module. I have not been in an organization ever that major incident management is in an area where it becomes problematic for organizations, in the sense that it's a high cost, high visibility type of issue typically. So there's a lot of focus on this area. So what we did in Kingston is we created a module that basically provides a single pane of glass across the entire major incident management lifecycle, if you will. But one of the keys to successful major incident management, I think we would all agree, is early detection. If you're finding out about a major incident after you've got 500 or 1,000 users down, you're already in reaction mode on this. So with Kingston, what we did is we created a model where any fulfiller can propose a major incident. So your service desk agent sees something coming in, and they're looking at this going, wow, this is a potential major incident because of the service or just what's happening. So they can right away propose that as a major incident, and now the major incident manager instantly has visibility into that major incident and can start to act on it ahead of time. So early detection is the key here. The next one is discipline. This can be a bit of a controversial topic, but I wanted to bring it up, and I'm going to touch a little bit more on it in the next slide, or the next couple slides, in problem management. But it's really important that you keep your focus in incident management on restoring normal service operations. And the reason I point that out is a lot of times incident managers kind of get pulled into this role of they're doing incident and some problem, or they might be working them together, or they have different hats on at different times. You want to keep your incident managers focused on restoring normal service operations to the best you can. And then lastly is the single system of record. So one of the key things that I didn't talk when I showed the platform slide earlier is natively you have this ability to relate records to each other in the database. So having these parent-child relationships or being able to relate one incident to another, or incidents to problems, problems to changes, changes back to incidents, what that allows you to do is really get a much better picture of the total cost of those services and also see what's going on from an activity perspective in the world of incident management. So we encourage customers to continue to take advantage of this relationship model that exists in the system. So change management, the first one is this balanced approach to risk. So what we recommend, and it's part of our change management solution today, is basically a balanced approach where you have both the risk calculation to go back on the back end and identify, what is the real risk, but also a subjective risk assessment that the change implementer responds to. So now I have both their perspective and I've got a calculation that's running in the background to give me the full picture of risk. This next one is standard changes. This is hugely underutilized across the industry, and every opportunity that I get to talk to customers about change management, I stress how important standard changes are. They really allow you to support your DevOps environment, for one, because now your teams can go fast. But secondly, they actually help you do a better job of change management overall. And the way they do that is it offloads a lot of the work and analysis that your CAB is having to do. So just to give you a real world example, at ServiceNow, we process about 120,000 changes a month. 90% of those changes, 90% are standard changes. So what that does is it frees up our CAB to look at those changes that have the highest risk and potential cost to the organization, so they have more time to accurately evaluate those. So take advantage of standard changes. The next one is emergency changes. I brought this up because I think we've all seen that these kind of get morphed around in a variety of areas inside IT. So there's sometimes you see latent changes, you see expedited changes, a lot of variations of emergency changes. Our recommendation is that emergency changes should only be raised from an incident, and that you should have clear policies around emergency changes. At the end of the day, if you think about it, this is an area where ITIL has done a pretty good job of defining. There's really 3 change types, and you should stick as close as you can to those, and that's standard, emergency, and normal changes. The next one is CAB Workbench. And this is not a sales pitch, but I just love our CAB Workbench solution, because anyone that's sat through a traditional or a legacy CAB meeting or had to build a CAB agenda from scratch will instantly recognize the power of CAB Workbench from ServiceNow. And what it really does is it automatically creates the CAB agenda for you based on a set of filters and conditions. But it also, if you're sitting in a CAB meeting, you can set up a notification so that you're notified to attend that CAB meeting only when your change is being presented or shortly before there. And what that does is it allows me to be a lot more focused, as a change implementer, to come in and present my change, or to, if I'm a change approver, I can look at just those changes. Very powerful. Definitely take a look at it. One other thing I just want to touch on with CAB Workbench is sometimes I think customers believe that CAB Workbench is just for the large enterprise, and that is absolutely not the case. Regardless of what size organization you are or what industry you're in, CAB Workbench has enormous power. It can add value. And then the last one is conflict detection. So the ability to, include your maintenance schedules, your blackout windows, and then being able to do that real-time conflict detection of up and downstream CIs that might be affected by a particular change will add huge value. And this is native to the ServiceNow platform, or the change management application, I should say. So let's talk a little bit about problem management. And I'm going to circle back in just a minute to the discussion we were having about incident management and the discipline there. So first off, problem management is a cash cow in most organizations. It's not very well adopted, but it can have just a huge return on investment. And I've been through a number of exercises on this with customers, and it has huge value. But a lot of times I think it doesn't get the adoption because customers think about problem management in this very structured root cause analysis or RCA approach that takes a lot of time and energy. So what we actually recommend as part of the reference architecture is that you take more of a tiered approach to your RCA. So you might use something like 5 whys and time box it. So maybe say over the next 2 hours, we're going to see if we can identify the root cause of this problem. And in the event that we can't, then we'll move on to a more structured root cause analysis like Kepner-Trego or Ishikawa diagrams, those kinds of things, and really do a deeper dive of that analysis. The next thing is proactive problem management. So what we recommend is you use something like Pareto analysis to identify patterns in the data, in your incident data, that are resulting in outages and call volumes. So once that's been identified, problem managers can focus their attention on solving the problems that will have the highest impact and ROI for the organization. So this is where I'm going to relate it back to the discussion we had about incident management discipline. Ideally, what you want your problem managers to do is they should be coming in every week and working on those top 5 or 6 problems that are costing your organization money. That should be their focus area. Now, that's not to suggest that they'll never get pulled in to run in parallel with major incident management. But at the end of the day, what you want is those problem managers are focused on those areas that have the highest ROI, and they can drain all of the noise and cost out of your incident program, incident management solution, or not solution, but the records that are coming in, and really start to tier that off. The other thing that I like about proactive problem management is a lot of times you don't have to have a dedicated staff. Think about re-leveraging or taking your service desk agents during non-peak times and assigning them proactive problem management. For one, they're dealing with these routine incidents that are coming in on a regular basis. But now you give them an exciting opportunity to kind of move off the phone and go in and find patterns in the data that they're working with to help identify those potential problem areas that may have high cost to the organization or that could help the service desk. The next one is continual reprioritization. So problem managers, in the example that I gave you earlier of coming in every week and having that top 5 or 6 problems that they're working on, it's important that they go through the continual reprioritization every week. So think about the record relationships that we were talking a little bit about earlier. So if a problem gets spawned off of an incident and there's several incidents that are related to it when it comes across to the problem manager. So it may, let's say it has 50 incidents when it comes across. The problem manager probably looks at it and says, yeah, that's a problem, but it's not on my top 5 or 6 list. So they go back the next week, take a look at that same problem, and now they find out there's 5,000 incidents that are related to that problem record. So the problem itself hasn't changed, but you can see that the dynamic of that problem has changed significantly. And now it may actually be on my top 5 or 6, maybe not just because of the volume, but it could also just be because of the rapid growth of how quickly the number of incidents are growing. So going through that continual prioritization is key. The next one is creating knowledge. So ServiceNow has a great knowledge solution, and you can create multiple knowledge databases or knowledge bases. So the idea here is to make sure that you tailor some of those knowledge bases directly to your customer environment. So you can publish things like known errors up to knowledge for the service desk, and then you can publish knowledge out to the business users. So again, you're starting to move that digital operating model in a way that you're bringing solutions and information and knowledge closer and closer to your business users and the consumers of that information. And then lastly is application areas. I always like to talk about this because I think it helps really paint the picture around problem management. So as IT professionals, we tend to think about problem management as, getting to the underlying root cause of one or more incidents. That's kind of the definition. But in reality, problem management is something that you can apply everywhere, not just in IT. So if you kind of abstract yourself back from even IT and think about problem solving in general, it's the same kinds of steps. Basically, you're defining the problem, identifying potential solutions, Then you identify the best possible solutions. And I point that out because a lot of times there may be a solution to the problem, but it may be just too costly to implement. And then lastly is implementing those solutions. And we apply these principles everywhere. What we encourage you to do within the reference architecture is apply them across IT as well. If you've got a process or a KPI that's underperforming, this could be a good area just to, take a problem management perspective across a bit and go after and look at root cause. The next one is top-level CMDB best practices. So these first two may seem like a bit of a statement of the obvious, but in most CMDB implementations I've looked at, they are not well defined in terms of scope or capturing requirements. So what we encourage customers to do is make sure your scope is clear, particularly if you're moving from legacy ITSM over to to a modern ITSM approach like ServiceNow, is to make sure the scope is clear and you understand exactly what you're going to do and have dedicated policies around these. And then capturing requirements. So make sure you have clear requirements. And this is a great time to apply some of those agile techniques of, have shorter release cycles and get key capabilities out to your consumers faster. The next one is right-sizing the program. I think years ago, there was a bit of a misconception that CMDB was kind of the save all of everything. So folks ended up dumping a lot of data in CMDB. And what they found is there was just frankly too much information in there to actually, keep the data clean and massage it. What we recommend is that you step back from this, and this is where you kind of look across those three pillars of people, process, and technology, and make sure that you've got all the pieces in place so that the program is optimized. And the next two kind of go hand in hand, and that is, use automation, discovery tools. So, and then do your service mapping, use service mapping capabilities as well. So trying to manually maintain data in the CMDB is kind of something of the past. So what we recommend is, automate those discoveries and do the service mapping so that you can see those up and downstream relationships as you're doing changes, or even if you're looking at costs or potential new releases, those kinds of things, huge value. And then one last point on CMDB. CMDB by itself or configuration management, they don't really have any requirements just in the context of their own discipline. The requirements come from the consumers. So CMDB managers, product managers, or service owners should be getting their requirements from incident management, problem management, change management, and some of the service owners to decide what level of detail is needed. And then lastly, it's just critically important that you have an ongoing awareness campaign so that both your customers, consumers, business users all have an understanding, because there's still a bit of a perception sometimes that IT is a black hole. And I think it's important to get the message out about what it is that's happening in the back end and why it adds value. So our Inspired team put this together, and I just love this diagram. And while you can never put all customers in one particular journey, because every customer's journey is different. And more importantly, every customer's journey should be different, because ITSM is not a Me Too thing. What you should do is tailor your ITSM program so that it provides competitive advantage for your organization. But in this example from the Inspired team, basically they came up with these three pillars: modernize, transform, and innovate. You could change these labels to whatever makes sense in your organization. But the beauty of this communication tool is that it tells you who the consumers are, what phase you're in, what capabilities you're going to bring to market, what the business value is, and specific outcomes. So now I've got a very simple tool that I can articulate where I'm going and help customers understand what this looks like without having to go through roadmaps and 300 slides to understand what the vision is and where you're going. So lastly, I just want to talk about some of the key takeaways. So periodic recalibration of your strategy, the digital operating model, and setting those maturity targets, creating a strong foundation. These can have enormous value in your organization. And I hope the examples I showed you today show these do not need to be complicated exercises, but they're very important to do and can add huge value. And at the end of the day, one of the things we want to achieve with the ITSM reference architecture is to help our customers be successful faster. So if we can help them close that white space and get some of that, those learnings built in up front, it has tremendous value. Number two is, make sure you're doing these capability mappings. Like I mentioned, both IT is agile, the business is agile. It's important to do that realignment exercise periodically on a regular cadence to make sure you've got the right alignment, you're making the right investments from an IT perspective. And then lastly is institutionalize those good practices to your ITSM foundation. But keep in mind, application best practices are going to evolve over time. So, keep an eye on our Customer Success Center. They're going to continue to build out practices as we release new capabilities to help articulate, for example, the agent intelligence. How do I optimize my prediction models with machine learning and those kinds of capabilities? So in conclusion, again, our customers are driving where we're going with this. So we would love to hear your feedback. Post your questions to communities at the end of this, and we will get out there and get answered for you. But in conclusion, we're really focused on, at least in version 1, accelerated time to value, lowering cost and maximizing ROI for our customers. And we want to have that great customer experience, or we want our customers to have that great customer experience. And then lastly, I just want to say thank you to all of our customers and partners. We place high value on everything you guys do, and we appreciate you as customers and partners. From my perspective, the reference architecture is yours. We're going to build it on the back end based on your requirements, but it's important for you to help guide us with this and tell us what you need. So with that, again, please submit your questions on ServiceNow communities, and thank you.